Today's story is not just about a man. It's about a legend. A man whose words shaped China, Asia, and even the modern world. His name was Confucius. This is not just a history lesson. This is a journey of pain, wisdom, rejection, loneliness, and greatness. This is a story that will help you understand life better, become a better person, and speak better English. More than 2,500 years ago, in the kingdom of Lu in ancient China, a baby was born. His name was Confucius, later known to the world as Confucius. He was born into a poor family. His father was a soldier, strong, brave, but very old when Confucius was born. His mother was young, wise, and gentle, but she knew this boy must carry greatness, because he will carry pain first. His father died when Confucius was just 3 years old. His mother raised him alone, in poverty, in a society that respected only the rich and ignored the poor. But even as a child, he was different. While other children played, Confucius asked, "Why do people lie? Why do rulers care more about war than their people? Why don't leaders live like role models?" His mother taught him morals, but Confucius taught himself everything else. He studied music, history, rituals, and poetry. He learned from anyone: old farmers, travelers, monks, dancers. He read ancient scrolls while others slept. But he was poor. He had no money, no fancy education, no rich connections. He had only one thing: a burning desire to understand life and change it. People thought he was strange, too serious, too wise for his age. When he spoke, adults laughed. When he questioned traditions, elders got angry. But Confucius kept learning. He believed, even if no one listens, I must learn, because someday the world will need my voice. His first job? Caretaker of animals, then a warehouse keeper, then a clerk. Small jobs, low money. But he never stopped reading, never stopped observing human nature. He watched rulers cheat. He watched priests sell fake rituals. He watched people pretend to be wise, but follow nothing true. And one day he whispered to himself, "One day, I will teach the truth even if I'm poor, even if I'm alone." By age 22, Confucius began teaching. He had no classroom, no official title, no salary, no university, but he had ideas that the world had never heard before. Lead by example, not by fear. Respect your parents. They gave you life. Do not do to others what you would not want done to you. A gentleman is not born, he is made through effort. The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying small stones. People were confused. Some laughed. But a few young men said, "I want to learn from this man." These men became his first students. But truth is heavy. And in those days, it was dangerous. Confucius was not rich, not powerful. He had no army, no temple, no title. So many government leaders hated him. They said, "He's too bold. He's telling people to think. He's dangerous." But Confucius never stopped. He believed the world could become a better place if people respected elders, followed rituals, spoke honestly, served the people, not power. One of his most powerful quotes was, "If the people are led by laws and punished by force, they will try to avoid punishment. But if they are led by virtue and guided by example, they will become better." That message shook the world. In his heart, Confucius had one dream: if only I could advise a king, if only I could serve a good ruler, I would help him build a peaceful kingdom. And so Confucius began traveling from state to state. He walked for miles, slept under trees, carried no gold, only books. He knocked on the doors of kings and governors and said, Let me help you rule with wisdom, not fear. Some gave him food, some laughed, some banned him from their cities. Some called him the mad philosopher. But he kept walking. He kept teaching, even when he was tired, sick, hungry, and rejected. He still believed. I was not born to please the rulers. I was born to serve the people. This was just the beginning of the journey. He had no throne, no weapons, no army, and no wealth. But he had one thing no ruler could kill: an unshakable truth. Part 2. The man who walked alone, carrying truth. Across a broken world, Confucius was rejected by rulers, mocked by officials, and ignored by power-hungry kings. He was tired, poor, and misunderstood. But he never gave up. He had no army, but his words were stronger than swords. He had no money, but his values were richer than any empire. He was now on a mission across China, walking from kingdom to kingdom with one hope. If I can find even one wise ruler, I will help him build a kingdom of peace, justice, and harmony. Confucius was now in his 50s. For years, he had taught students. But now, he left home to spread truth. He walked for thousands of miles, carrying only a small bag of scrolls, a staff, and his belief. But the world was broken. Warlords were fighting. Governments were corrupting. Innocent people were suffering. He arrived at one palace. The guards stopped him. "Who are you?" Confucius said. "I am a teacher of virtue. Let me serve your ruler. I seek no gold, no title, only a chance to guide with wisdom." The guards laughed. The minister said, "We don't need poems and morals. We need weapons and strategies." And just like that, Confucius was sent away again. But he didn't cry. He turned to his students and said, "A river keeps flowing even when the mountain blocks it. We keep walking." In one region, no king would meet them. It was winter, food was gone, and they had no shelter. One of his students fell sick. Another said, "Master, what are we doing? No one wants your wisdom." Confucius looked weak, but his voice was steady. "When you light a lamp in daylight, no one sees it. But in darkness, even a small light can save a life." He gathered dry grass, made a fire, and began teaching under the stars. He taught ethics. He taught self-discipline. He taught loyalty, humility, and the art of being human, even in suffering. He taught. Finally, Confucius reached a kingdom where the ruler seemed curious. The king asked, "What will you teach me?" Confucius said, "I will teach you to rule not with fear, but with righteousness." He taught, "Use rituals to inspire, not to control. Respect the people's pain. Don't reward flatterers, reward truth. Don't build big armies, build big hearts." But the king had enemies. His advisors whispered, "This philosopher will weaken you." Soon, Confucius was blamed for slowing reforms. He was chased out at night, under threat. One advisor wanted him executed, but a loyal student helped him escape. Confucius, now sick and coughing blood, looked up at the stars and whispered, "They fear me, not because I am wrong, but because I am right." In one province, a warlord invited Confucius to dine. It was a trap. As they entered the hall, his students noticed. No guards, no candles, no food. One whispered, "Master, we must leave." As they tried to exit, soldiers with swords appeared. Confucius said nothing. He closed his eyes. He stood tall. But then, from behind, a brave official who had once been his student arrived with soldiers. "Let him go. If you kill him, you kill China's conscience." The attackers fled. Confucius survived. But now he was famous not for power, but for being a threat to the powerful. By now, Confucius had more than 70 dedicated students. Some were rich, some poor, some old, some young. They followed him not for money, but for meaning. He taught them how to speak with grace, how to listen with respect, how to govern with virtue, how to live with discipline. One student asked, "Master, what is success?" He answered, "Success is not in what you achieve. It's in what you become." Another asked, "Master, will your words survive?" He smiled and said, "If people love truth, my voice will never die." After 13 years of wandering, Confucius returned to Lu, his birthplace. He was now in his 60s, older, wiser, tired, but unbroken. People had changed. His fame had spread. Young scholars came to hear him. Even old enemies now respected him. He was invited to speak in temples. He met governors. He gave advice. But he never accepted power. He said, "I don't want to rule. I want to teach the rulers how to rule themselves." And finally, he began to write. Confucius believed truth must be written down, not just spoken. He gathered his students and began editing. The Book of Songs, Ancient Poetry, the Book of Rites, Rituals and Manners, the Spring and Autumn Annals, History of Lu, the Book of Documents, Ancient Speeches, and he created the Analects, his conversations and wisdom. He was not just a teacher now. He was a guardian of civilization. He told his students, "You must carry this truth even when I am gone." And every night, even when his hands shook and his eyes failed, he kept writing. Among his 70-plus disciples, there was one student who was closest to Confucius's heart. His name was Yan Hui, also called Yan Yuan. He was quiet, deeply humble, intelligent, and full of compassion. Confucius once said, "Out of all my students, Yan Hui loves learning most. He listens more than he speaks. He does more than he demands. He walks the path even when no one watches." Yan Hui was not only a student, he was like a son to Confucius. But tragedy was coming. Yan Hui died suddenly at a very young age. It was said he died from illness and starvation, caused by his extreme simplicity and poor life. When Confucius heard the news, he did not speak for a long time. Then he stood alone and whispered, "The heavens are destroying me. The heavens are destroying me." For the first time, the man who taught the world to accept pain with wisdom was seen crying like a father who lost his own child. He said, "Heaven took away the one who never complained. He was the one I thought would carry my legacy." His disciples were silent. The camp was quiet for days. Confucius did not eat for 3 days. But finally, with trembling hands, he picked up a scroll and said, "Even in sorrow, the ritual must continue. I must write again." As Confucius grew older, his words became even deeper, like water that had traveled far. He said things that shaped centuries. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. He who learns but does not think is lost. He who thinks but does not learn is in danger. The man who asks a question is a fool for a minute. The man who does not ask is a fool for life. Respect yourself and others will respect you. The strength of a nation comes from the virtue of its people. He warned rulers, "If you want peace in your kingdom, first bring peace to your family. If you want peace in your family, first bring peace to your thoughts." He told students, "If you make a mistake and do not correct it, this is called a mistake." Every morning he would teach. Every night he would write. Even when his hands shook and his legs hurt and his eyes blurred, he kept teaching because he believed the roots of education are bitter. but the fruit is sweet. But not everyone loved Confucius. There were officials, warlords, and priests who hated him because he exposed their greed. They accused him of destroying traditions, confusing the youth, challenging divine order, making rulers feel weak. One governor even said, "If Confucius dies, our empire will have silence again." Books were burned in some regions. His name was mocked in temples. Teachers were told not to quote him. But Confucius remained calm. He said, "If a crooked man hates me, it means I walk straight." As he entered his 70s, Confucius began to feel time running out. One day, sitting beside a lake, he said to his students, "My life is like a bird that sings in the dark forest. I do not know if others hear me, but I sing anyway." He began to reflect on his failures. "I never ruled a kingdom." On his regrets. "I wish I had hugged Yan Hui more." On his joy. "I turned poor boys into great men." He told his disciples, "Don't worship me when I'm gone. Worship the truth. Worship virtue. Worship effort." He didn't want to be a god. He wanted to be a bridge from darkness to light. Many don't know, Confucius had a son named Kong Li. But their relationship was distant. Confucius loved virtue more than blood. He never gave his son special treatment. One day, a disciple asked, "Master, why don't you speak to your son like you speak to us?" Confucius replied, "Because I want him to become a man, not just a son of Confucius." He believed greatness must be earned, not inherited. Years later, Kong Li would go on to teach Confucian ideas himself. But Confucius died believing that his students were his true legacy. Confucius became weak. He could no longer walk long distances. His voice became softer. His eyes looked far, as if watching something beyond this world. One morning, he sat with his most loyal disciples. He looked at them, one by one, and said, "Zilu, your courage will serve the people. Zigong, your wisdom will spread my words, Zixia. Your poetry will keep our beauty alive." Then he closed his eyes and said, "I dreamed of the Duke of Zhou last night. I think it's time." The students wept. Part 3. The master dies, but his voice refuses to be silent. The room was dim. The scrolls were stacked. The old master, now in his 70s, was breathing slower, speaking softer and dreaming deeper. He knew the end was near, but he was not afraid. He was preparing, not for death, but for immortality. Each day his students came, kneeled beside him, and waited. He didn't speak much. He didn't eat much. But sometimes his eyes opened wide, and he would whisper lines of poetry, fragments of dreams, memories of stars, tears of wisdom. One morning, he opened his eyes and said, "I dreamed again of the Duke of Zhou. He stood by a bridge made of books. I think I will cross it soon." The students looked at each other. They knew the final sunrise was coming. It was a clear morning, no clouds, no rain, just silence. Confucius was lying on a bamboo mat, his scrolls close to him. His robes were white. His hands rested gently on his chest. His most loyal disciples were present. Zilu, the brave. Zigong, the eloquent. Zixia, the poetic Zhengzi, the moral compass. Yuzi, the wise one. He looked at them all, smiled weakly, and said, "My body will return to dust. But words, they float forever. Be like water, soft yet unstoppable." Then he closed his eyes. He did not cry. He did not tremble. He simply stopped. The room was frozen in stillness. Zhengzi cried first. Zigong bit his lip and turned away. Zilu dropped his sword and knelt. And for the first time, the world was without Confucius. The disciples built a tomb beside the Sea River in Khufu, his hometown. They carried his body with their bare hands. They refused music, refused food, and wore mourning robes. Zhengzi said, "Let the world eat. We shall grieve." They buried him with no gold, no crown, no offerings, only his books, his writing brush, and a small bamboo flute. The flute was never played again. For 3 years, his students stayed by the grave, practicing the old mourning ritual. They slept in tents. They read his teachings aloud every day. They cleaned the tomb daily. They refused to return home. Even when their families begged, they replied, "We buried the body, but the soul is still teaching." After Confucius died, the world didn't immediately celebrate him. In fact, for a while, it almost forgot him. China was still broken. Warlords were still fighting. And people asked, who was that old teacher who walked around saying poetry? Some mocked him. He spoke, but never ruled. He taught, but changed nothing. He died like a poor man. Governments were too busy surviving. Temples ignored his name. Kings never quoted him. It seemed like his legacy would disappear into dust. But it didn't, because his students were still alive and they refused to be silent. Each student returned to his own town. They became teachers in schools, advisors in courts, writers of books, carriers of a flame that would not die. They copied the Analects by hand, scroll by scroll, brush by brush. They told their own students, "This is not a religion. This is not a chant. This is a way to live as a real human." They used rituals to bring discipline. They used quotes to bring peace. They used lessons to correct tyrants, and slowly, like water filling cracks in a broken pot, Confucius returned. At first, many dynasties didn't care about Confucius. But then came the Han Dynasty, around 140 BCE, almost 300 years after his death. Emperor Wu of Han faced a choice. His people were disobedient. His nobles were corrupt. The empire was powerful, but soulless. One of his advisors said, "Your Majesty, if you want strength that lasts, don't build taller walls, build better minds. Teach Confucius." The emperor agreed. And from that moment, Confucianism became the soul of the Chinese government. The Han Dynasty built schools teaching Confucian thought, exams for officials based on Confucian texts, temples in his name across every province, shrines where people burned incense and read his words. Confucius was no longer a wandering philosopher. He became the standard of ethics, the model of education, the definition of Chinese culture. Children memorized his words. Leaders quoted his lessons. Even foreign countries, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, began to follow Confucian teachings. The man who died in silence was now shaping empires. Over centuries, Confucius was given more than 50 noble titles by different emperors. Great sage, first teacher of the people. Model teacher for 10,000 generations. Most holy and revered philosopher. In some periods, his descendants were given land, honors, and power. One emperor even said, "If Buddha is the light of the soul, Confucius is the structure of society." His tomb became a pilgrimage site. His teachings became required study for anyone who wanted to work in government. Thanks to his disciples, these 5 classic texts survived. 1. The Book of Rites, about manners, rituals, and social rules. 2. The Book of Songs, ancient Chinese poetry and values. 3. The Book of History, speeches from past kings. 4. The Spring and Autumn Annals, a political journal written by Confucius himself. 5. The Analects, conversations, quotes, and lessons from Confucius. These became the foundation of Chinese education for 2,000 years. Millions memorized them. Millions passed exams based on them. And today, millions still read them. In modern times, Confucius is not just Chinese. His face is in textbooks in the West, quotes in Harvard lecture halls, posters in schools across Africa, TED Talks, PhD theses, leadership books. His quotes appear on social media, often without people knowing he said them. His words are still alive because they are universal. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. The superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions. Wherever you go, go with all your heart. Education breeds confidence. Confidence breeds hope. Hope breeds peace. He has been dead for over 2,000 years, but he still teaches. Part 4. The Fire, the Ashes, and the Return of a Forgotten Sage. China, 1966. Chairman Mao Zedong, the leader of Communist China, launched the Cultural Revolution. His mission? To destroy the 4 olds. 1. Old customs. 2. Old culture. 3. Old habits. 4. Old ideas. Guess what symbolized all 4 in the eyes of the radicals? Confucius. He was seen as too traditional, too moral, too passive, too connected to ancient emperors and aristocrats. And so, the unimaginable began across China. Confucian temples were vandalized. Statues were smashed. Tombs were dug up. His books were burned in public fires. His name was removed from textbooks. People who quoted him were punished. In Khufu, his hometown, a sacred city for 2,000 years, Red Guards stormed through streets, tore down altars, broke tablets, and mocked his image. They even tried to dig up his grave. Old professors who taught Confucianism were humiliated, beaten, and forced to confess their crimes. The crime of teaching ancient wisdom. Millions of Chinese citizens were told, Confucius is dead. Follow the new path, not the old one. Imagine you were a school teacher in 1966. You had taught Confucius your whole life. Now suddenly, you were labeled an enemy. Old scholars wept silently as their libraries were destroyed. Mothers burned Confucian books at night to avoid arrest. Children were taught. Confucius was a lie. Revolution is the truth. It was one of the darkest chapters in Chinese intellectual history. The man who taught peace was attacked in the name of progress. But history has a strange way of correcting itself. In the late 1970s, after Mao's death, China began to open up again. And something remarkable happened. Confucius came back. Why? Because China realized it had lost morality in its rush for revolution. It needed ethics, not just economics. It needed a cultural soul, not just concrete buildings. Schools started teaching his values again. Temples were slowly rebuilt. Scholars began reprinting ancient texts. Even the government said, "We misunderstood him, we need him again." The flame had survived the storm. Here's something unbelievable. Confucius had a son, and that son had a son, and generation after generation, they kept going. As of today, Confucius has a documented family tree with over 2 million descendants. It is the longest recorded family lineage in history. Even during the Cultural Revolution, many of his descendants hid their identity to survive. But today, some of them proudly say, "I am the 85th generation descendant of Confucius." They still hold ceremonies in his name. They still visit his tomb in Khufu. They still light incense, bow 3 times, and read his words. The bloodline remains. So does the wisdom. Let's step outside China for a moment. Today, Confucius's name appears in universities, philosophy books, diplomacy, business ethics, moral psychology, parenting seminars. More than 160 countries now have Confucius Institutes, cultural centers that teach Chinese language and philosophy. Using his name, he studied at Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, Yale. He's quoted in business keynotes, self-help books, peace treaties, political speeches, personal journals, and he's been featured in Hollywood documentaries, global exhibitions, World Heritage sites. But not everyone understood Confucius the right way. In the West, for many years, people thought he was too conservative, too rigid, too focused on rituals, not spiritual enough. But in recent decades, modern scholars are correcting that now they're discovering. Confucius was not promoting blind obedience. He promoted leading by example. He was not anti-change. He wanted ethical change. He was not emotionless. He just believed emotion must be guided by discipline. He's now recognized as one of the greatest moral thinkers the world has ever known. Let's pause for a moment. Here are just a few more lines that are still shaking the world today. To be wrong is nothing, unless you remember it afterward. When anger rises, think of the consequences. Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. By 3 methods we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, the noblest. Second, by imitation, the easiest. Third, by experience, the bitterest. Every time you read a quote that touches your soul, you are meeting Confucius again. Even if you didn't know his name, his words had already found you. And now, you. After everything you've learned so far, pause and ask yourself, how many men die and are forgotten forever? But how many men die and come back stronger every century? Confucius was born poor, lived in exile, was mocked, attacked, erased. But today, he is studied in more than 70 countries, translated into over 100 languages, and continues to shape the minds of millions. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real. To understand the full power of Confucius's legacy, you must see it like this. He didn't create a religion. He didn't create a law code. He didn't tell people to worship him. He created a moral operating system, a framework for thinking, speaking, leading, behaving, living. This system can be applied by a child learning how to respect parents, a student studying how to discipline their mind, a leader learning how to govern without corruption, a citizen learning how to serve society with integrity. His mind was a blueprint for everyone. Here are 10 timeless pillars of Confucius's teachings that are still changing the world. 1. Ren, humanity, compassion, kindness. This is the heart of Confucianism. What you do not wish for yourself, do not do to others. It's deeper than be nice. It means treat others with empathy, understanding, and moral courage. Even today, this value forms the foundation of social responsibility, mental health conversations, conflict resolution, respect between people of different classes, nations, and beliefs. 2. Li, rituals, respect, proper behavior. To Confucius, rituals weren't about religion. They were about reminding humans how to behave properly, especially under pressure. He believed, when a man acts with Li, he transforms chaos into order. In modern terms, it's holding the door for someone, speaking gently even when angry, listening when someone older is speaking, respecting tradition while moving forward. Manners, etiquette, and professionalism are all rooted in this 3. Xiao, filial piety, respect for parents and ancestors. Confucius taught, a man who cannot honor his parents cannot serve his country. This is not just about obedience. It's about gratitude, sacrifice, and caring for elders even when inconvenient. Even today, Chinese New Year family gatherings, Asian respect for grandparents, family-first cultures across Asia, all trace back to this one idea 4G, Zhu, wisdom through reflection. Confucius didn't just say, get educated. He said, learning without reflection is useless. Reflection without learning is dangerous. Wisdom is not just reading. It's thinking deeply about what you read. This principle is behind journaling, therapy, meditation, philosophy courses, decision-making strategies in leadership and business. 5. Yi, righteousness over profit. Confucius warned against greed. The noble man understands what is right. The petty man understands what is profitable. In a world filled with scams, corruption, fake influencers, and selfish decisions, this teaching is more relevant than ever, he taught. Do the right thing, even when it costs you. 6. Zhang, loyalty, especially to what's right. But loyalty, for Confucius, didn't mean blind obedience. It meant being honest, even if it made your boss or ruler uncomfortable. He believed, to serve your leader, speak the truth. If he does wrong, correct him. Today, we call this speaking truth to power. Constructive feedback. Whistleblowing. Moral courage. 7. Shu, forgiveness and tolerance. This is often misunderstood. Confucius believed in understanding others through your own pain. In modern terms, empathy, emotional intelligence, seeing others' struggles before judging. 8. Junzi, the ideal human being. Confucius's ultimate goal was to turn every person into a junzi, a superior person. Not superior in status, but in character. A junzi is calm under pressure, honest without cruelty, strong without pride, humble without weakness, always learning. Imagine a world where every leader tried to be a junzi that was his dream. 9. Self-cultivation, Shu Shen. Discipline before change. Confucius said, don't try to fix the world before fixing yourself. He believed all change begins within. That's why so many of his quotes are about daily effort, watching your words, practicing patience, improving habits. It's the foundation of modern self-help, 10 education for all. In Confucius's time, only the rich could afford education. But he broke the rule. He said, in teaching, there should be no class distinctions. He taught poor farmers he welcomed anyone hungry for knowledge. That idea changed history. And today, every school system owes something to him. You may not realize it, but when you sit quietly to think, that's Confucius. When you control your anger, that's Confucius. When you teach a child respect, that's Confucius. When you speak honestly to your boss, that's Confucius. When you put family first, that's Confucius. When you learn something new and apply it, that's Confucius. He's not just in China. He's in the structure of how good people live. Everywhere Confucius believed in daily improvement. He would have loved your journey. He once said, the man who moves a mountain begins by carrying small stones. That's how you're learning English, one word at a time, one sentence at a time, one powerful story at a time. He would say to you, do not worry if you are not famous. Worry about becoming worth knowing. Near the end of his life, Confucius asked, is there anyone who truly understands me? The truth is, the world didn't understand him while he lived. But thousands of years later, millions understand him now. And maybe right now, at this very moment, you are one of them. Because when you speak kindly, act with integrity, learn without giving up, respect those who came before, and lead with humility, you are not just living, You are continuing the work of Confucius. This is the final part of our four-part journey. But his story doesn't truly end here. Why? Because you are the next student, and every student who carries truth forward keeps the teacher alive. Confucius lived. He walked. He failed. He wept. He was forgotten. He returned. He changed the world. And he still is. If this story moved you, if it helped your English, if it made you think deeper about your own life, then Confucius has done it again. Through your mind, your heart, your voice. Subscribe to this channel, share this video, and never stop learning. Because as Confucius said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Thank you for walking this journey with him. And with me. The story is complete, but the wisdom lives on in you.